Here at the edge of the Cedars Museum, the reason why they built the museum here was so they could incorporate a Pueblo site. Now it's actually two villages, kind of spanning a couple hundred years apart, but it's all still here. We're gonna go out, we're gonna take a look at these. There's not too much to see on the outside because a lot of it you cannot go in. However, we are going to be able to go inside an intact kiva. And once we go in, we'll talk a little bit about it. When you see a lot of the great house communities like in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, or in Mesa Verde, you got hundreds of people living in one pueblo. That's not the norm. Normally, you kind of have an extended family unit where you have like 8 rooms in a kiva, 8 rooms in a kiva. And if you build out from there too much, you might have to go a little, a few miles down the road and build another 8 rooms in a kiva and the crops to support it as well. Now this kind of round room here, this is actually what's left of a kiva that is not intact. But if you can see what's left, right here, right here, right here, right here, right here, there's kind of like little columns, little pillars. And so if you see a kiva that's not intact, people think, oh, what is that, like a bench or something? But it's not. There's a spiral pattern in which the logs were increasingly spiraled and overlapped to build up. We're going to see one intact in a second. But anytime you see those little columns around the edge, you can know that the kiva went up about another 3, 4, 5 feet beyond those columns. So really, this kiva top would have been about this height in practice when it was in piece and in together. This now is the entrance to the kiva. And before we go into this kiva, you notice there's a ladder outside. Now this is a modern ladder, and again, it's held together with carriage bolts, it's drilled, it's bolted together. It's really stable, really solid, and that's great, especially where this is a place where so many people are coming up and down. But again, we looked earlier at an artifact, a preserved ladder from the past, and we saw that it wasn't bolted together, it was lashed together with strips of willow, which again is absolutely fascinating. We're gonna go down inside this kiva and see what it's like inside and talk a little bit about some of the uses for this place. Welcome to the inside of a pretty traditional sized kiva. And I want to give you a little bit of a walk around of some of the structures. Now, first of all, you'll notice behind me, we looked outside at some of those columns or pillars, and I talked about those, how they held up a spiral of logs. Now, if you look up above, that is exactly what you see, and you can see going all the way around that spiral woven around together to hold things up. So again, if you ever see a circular room and you see little columns, but there's no roof, this is probably what it looked like when it was intact. Now you notice also there's adobe covering things, and where the adobe has fallen off down below, you can see the stone masonry underneath. Most kivas had this nice adobe covering, and that was it. There was no decor, but we do know of one. There's one place called Pottery Mound, New Mexico, and it has elaborate, vibrant, decadent paintings of human images and people holding macaws and coyotes dancing around. There's nothing else like it anywhere else in the Southwest in a kiva. But normally a kiva inside, as far as decor, is very conservative in its display. But coming into a kiva like this is sort of a sacred space. Now, how do you have a fire in here? Well, you got a ladder to get down in. The fireplace is right here. This is where you might light your fire. Now you've got to keep that fire small so you don't light your ladder on fire. But also, how do you not smoke yourself out? Here is the air shaft. It goes underground, and there's basically a chimney behind here that goes up. This sucks air from outside and it comes up right here. Now you see these rocks, these are a ring that are a fire block. Now those would have been higher up in usage, but again, you got to suck air in, but when that air comes in, it's going to cause a little bit of a breeze. You don't want that breeze to blow out your fire or to make it burn so bright that you light your lighter on fire. So again, very small fire here, and again with a wind block. Now a lot of kivas don't have multiple rocks here, they'll just have one big flat slab right here. Now I'm standing in a circular, well, kind of like an oval trench. Oftentimes we see two of these on either side of the ladder, and occasionally only one. Now we also see this structure in the great kivas of Chaco, New Mexico, and Aztec, New Mexico, kivas that are so big that they could fit hundreds of people. But those also had these big structures. Now, descendants of some of these people who used kivas say different and even conflicting things on what these kind of ovals were used for. We don't know for 100% sure, but we know that they are a hallmark of every kiva to have at least one, and if not, maybe two of them together. Now this structure is very, very cool in the summer and very warm in the winter. I was actually at this kiva a few weeks ago in the middle of a snowstorm, and it was blisteringly cold outside, and I came down in and it was cozy. I didn't even have to have a jacket on in here. It was cozy even with no fire. So there's good insulation to keep a pretty consistent temperature. Some of the ancestors of the people who were in this place tell us that even though it was a sacred space, that it was also a communal place, that it wasn't always just for ceremony and ritual, but also was just a place where you might gather together. But again, we'll never know because the people who made this kiva are not here. Some of their descendants are, and they can give us their insight, but the people who built this actual kiva are not with us anymore. So we have to put the pieces together the best we can and try to understand these beautiful structures. Every time I come into kiva, I feel a sense of awe. I almost feel like I'm going into the underworld, into a sacred space. It's kind of like if you go to a cathedral. I'm not Catholic, but every time I've ever visited a cathedral, I feel a sense of awe. I go from the bustle of the wild world, and then I go into this dark cathedral with big vaulted ceilings, with light shining in through gorgeous stained glass windows, and I feel a sense of awe. I sense that this is someplace special, and I feel something that transcends religion, that transcends nationality. And it's the same thing. Anytime I enter a kiva, I always feel a sense of awe, and I always want to show respect being in here because the people who had their lives here, I like to think that their spirits are still here with us. And so I want to show respect in that way. But again, this is a real treat to be able to come to the edge of the Cedars Museum and to be able to go in an intact kiva. So right now I am over here by this pueblo that we've been looking at. And you can see this is pretty intact, but I mentioned earlier there's two villages here. This is the more recent village that you see still standing, this little pueblo. But if you look on the other side, over here in this area, you see kind of these piles, these heaped up piles, and you see rocks in there. Underneath that is an entirely separate village that dates back earlier about another 200 years. So again, there were reasons to build on this site. We don't know why, but there was advantageous reasons for a later group to come in and build on this same site. And it's noteworthy that they didn't just rebuild what had already been built, but instead build an entirely new structure with entirely new stone. We don't know why that is. We don't know if that's convenient. To me, it seems inconvenient. But we understand that there was likely purpose behind that type of thinking. Maybe something ceremonial or respectful, saying, hey, we like this site to live, but we want to make our own home. So it's kind of neat to know 2 villages right next to each other.